Okay. All right, my name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here at Atticus Wine with Ximena Orrego, and Guy Insley. It's December 6th, 2019. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate this. Let's start with the most important question of all, which is why wine?
You start.
Oh, why wine? Well, I grew up in France. I moved to France when I was about 4 years old and lived in Paris with my parents and my sister. And obviously wine is a big part of the French experience, and I distinctly remember being given watered down wine at an early age at Sunday lunchtime as part of the growing up experience as a young Frenchman. And my dad was big into Bordeaux wines, and we would go down and visit. I remember 2 or 3 trips down to Bordeaux area from Paris, visiting the French chateaus, and he would always get a box of a cubitainer, a cubiliter, I can't remember what it's called, but it's about a 40-litre plastic box, which was a very weird experience. I mean, looking back now, but what that would be a decent quality chateau. I mean, there wasn't a Premier Grand Cru or anything, but it was like a good quality Bordeaux wine, and they would ship him 40 litres of wine to our house in Paris, and he and his buddy on a Saturday afternoon would go downstairs to the cellar and bottle 40 litres worth of wine. Remarkably, a couple of bottles will probably get consumed on the way through the process, and they would come up very happy. But, they would just that passion for the wine industry and the whole sort of experience and what have you was motivating for me from that perspective. And then when I went to university in Scotland, the option that I had as part of my economics and French course was to go teach French kids English, and I asked for a southern French city as opposed. That was my choice. It was north or south. So I was going, well, I know the north. I lived in Paris for a while. Let's go south. And they gave me a town called Libourne, and Libourne is just a few miles between Bordeaux and Saint-Emilion. So it's the large town next to Saint-Emilion, effectively, about the same size as Mac, and it has all the children of the wine industry go there. And so as an English assistant, we got to know, there was 2 or 3 English assistants and other languages as well, but pretty big school. And we got to know all the parents of the kids, right, from all aspects of the wine industry. And this is what really triggered me in terms of being fascinated by the whole thing. So we got to know the kids of the growers, the kids of the co-op owners, the kids of the negociants, the kids of the bigger places like the Moexes and the what have you. So it's people who had more. Who own more vertically of the place, but generically there you own a vineyard, full stop, and you give your grapes, and then what happens in the co-op, and there's so many layers of what you do. And one thing I took away was my thesis for my finals was the marketing and Saint-Emilion wines in Great Britain, and that was really where the business side met the wine side. So you went from understanding how that grower and what his economics or her economics look like. And then what the co-ops look like, and what the negociant, and what the exporter, and what the importer, and then the wholesaler, and then the retailer, and then Joe Blow back in London buying the wine for £30 or wherever it is, or £20, and you imagine how many cuts happen on the way, and you understand why the chateau owner in Saint-Emilion, who owns a couple of acres of land in Saint-Emilion, is a subsistence farmer effectively, because they're not getting a lot of money for that. And that was just fascinating for me, that whole aspect of things, and how they still loved it, and it was about passion and about how wine wasn't to make money. It was really about loving the business. And it was really interesting to see all that. And a couple of my co-assistants got into the business, and they still are, so they work in various aspects of the wine business, but I went back and finished my studies and got into a different parts of the business, but that brought me eventually to the US, and we met in the early 2000s and married in 2002, and it was that conversation which we had around what are we going to do for the rest of our lives. And it was initially, well, I'd like to retire to a vineyard. That's my, always been my passion, and I would really like to do that. That would make, there's a comfort feeling about what would make my heart happy to do that. And that was, and Ximena's answer was, why are we waiting? And I'm going like, I don't have a good answer for that one. So we started looking around, and we had been to Portugal on a honeymoon. We, obviously knew the various areas of France pretty well, and we'd been to California. We had went to New Zealand on a holiday / fact-finding trip, and that was quickly jinxed because of the parents deciding that was way too far away to go to. But we did look at it in terms of how it would moving there, buying land, all this sort of stuff. But that was put on the back burner. And then we found out about Oregon because we tried
our first Oregon Pinot Noir in Florida in the spring of 2004, and so we were just really intrigued. The Willamette Valley had never been on our radar, and we came here on vacation during harvest, October of 2004. And Guy had set aside some time to spend with a vineyard realtor, really focused on a small property, 4 or 5 acres that we could have on the side and really, come in the summer or during breaks. But that one day turned into like 3-4 days, and every day Guy would ask, so what else do you have? And what else do you have? And so we ended up walking this property, which was beyond completely what we had looked for. And throughout those days, of course, we ended up tasting more wine and eating all the beautiful food and just really being enamored with the area. And so when we walked this property, we came back with our 6-month-old in his little backpack without the realtor, and we were like, okay, so can we do this? And we're like, okay, well, if we completely change our way of life, this is going to be our journey. And so that's what we decided. Just right here, there was nothing, and that was also the appeal. If we were going to do this, it has to be completely our way, because we had seen properties that already had vineyard planted, that had a home on it. This was just a clover field, 50 acres of clover, and so by the end of our trip, we placed a bid on the property and went back home, and everyone thought we were crazy. But then the bid was accepted, and so that was in 2004, and we started planting the vineyard the winter of 2005, 2006, and then we moved here permanently in 2007. In February of 2007. And our daughter at that point had been born. She was 3 weeks old when we moved. So it was really crazy. We were just really, we were just infatuated with the place.
So Ximena's parents lived a mile and a half down the road from our little house in Florida. And so we moved here, with a 3-week-old and a 3-year-old. With no
so we decided for the really tough, challenging road, but no regrets, It's just because it's a journey.
Never a minute of regret.
Yeah, really. It's just
despite there's been a lot of hard work, and a lot of missed opportunities because you're putting your time, effort, and money into one thing here, and you're giving up a whole pile of other stuff, and that's fine. At the end of the day, that's been our choice.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what you were doing before 2002, or 2000 when you.
So we met actually. We were working for the same company. We met through common friends. So I was in the telecom industry. I used to work for Nortel Networks, and at that point in time, I was on the operations side, and and so this was just completely something. So different, really didn't know anything about farming. Guy and I both lived in different places throughout our childhood, but always big cities. And but this was the opportunity to be in such a gorgeous rural setting and have such a different way of life. But and then when we moved here, I was still in the corporate world, and I took a sabbatical of about 18 months, and I worked as a harvest intern for a winery, for Scott Scholl, Raptor Ridge, in 2007, and in 2008, I was his first cellar rat in the spring of 2008. And I clearly remember, our nanny bringing my daughter into the winery during harvest. And she was just a wee baby. But he became, in many ways, he's been our mentor from a winemaking perspective. He's been crucial to our journey, and but yeah, it was a big switch to move from wearing suits to wearing, what harvest interns wear, and just being wet all the time, because that was a really tough vintage. In 2007, it was cold and wet all the time. So,
but one of the things what's the past tense of it? Has stricken. Anyway, us.
You're the British one.
Yeah. Is that we both moved a lot with our families and with our jobs before we moved to the States. So I was born in Hong Kong, lived in Argentina, moved to Paris, moved to London, went up to study in Scotland, back to France for this, back to the UK, back to France for National Service, and then and then started working in London, then moved to Miami in the late 90s. And Ximena, similarly with her family, born in Peru, but time in Venezuela, Panama, Canada, missing one, Guatemala. So a lot of moving before we came to Miami, and then but now we've been here 12 years, and
almost 13.
15 years since we bought the property, and it is the longest we've been
anywhere
in a specific country, because we've been in the US for 20 plus years, right? So. And the longest we've lived in any individual house, and we have no intention of moving. It's amazing. It's like we've, the cliche we've put down roots is very true, because we really feel that, and the kids feel that, and they feel very very much at home here. Obviously, being Oregonians, barring a few weeks of their lives, so.
and literal roots as well.
Literal roots, exactly. That's right. It's a bit of a cliche, but.
So I'm curious. You had seen all these wine regions. You'd seen California. You'd seen France. You'd seen New Zealand. Why Oregon? What was it about Oregon that made you keep looking and decide this was the place?
Well, I think one of the things that became very obvious in the beginning was, first of all, it was still a young industry. And the welcoming of people. Very early on, we met some of the key people from our Yamhill Carlton AVA, and they were just so helpful. Everyone wanted to offer their opinion. Everyone wanted to offer their advice, and to a certain degree, it's still the same way today. I'm now an active member of our Yamhill Carlton AVA. I'm part of the board and an active member of the marketing community, of the marketing committee. In many ways, I feel it's because I want to now contribute and share and help advance our AVA, just like we received help, in the early days. And I think that's what was really appealing, is the fact that people were so welcoming and just eager to embrace a newcomer.
Right. I mean, to be fair, a lot of that was a pleasant surprise after we'd made the mad commitment kind of thing.
I think
the welcoming was certainly that feeling of that was certainly there.
It was.
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
And but the other factors I think were around. We wanted to to buy land, obviously, and so there's the economics were involved in terms of we wanted to getting somewhere. So the youth of the industry here was appealing because we thought that the older it was, the tougher it would be to integrate to some extent, but also just to be able to get land here and actually make it work. But certainly those we wanted to be close to somewhere, to a large city.
Yes,
so
that was key as well.
Yeah, because some of the places obviously are a long way from anywhere, and it's, you know, we've been just blown away by what Portland brings itself in terms of just people and culture and things to do and what have you. And it's you know, we knew about the food and the wine, but it's been a real pleasure to find out more than that, right?
But I think key, like, I mean, what underlies it was the fact that we just fell in love with Pinot Noir. You know, I mean, really, it's just, I mean, you being traditionally more of a Bordeaux drinker, you know, he was very much, you know, Bordeaux blend or Bordeaux's. And, but it's just after tasting that first Oregon Pinot Noir, and that was like an introduction to then all this beautiful wine that we tasted here on that trip. And we're like, this is, it's an opportunity to make this kind of wine, you know? Because obviously the wines being produced in California and Portugal and New Zealand, very different, right? But I think that was an important piece as well.
That's right, that, the people, the location, the ability to fit in, it all just made sense. And that's why, you know, it felt like a rash decision in some ways, but it was pretty well prepared. In terms of the background work and what have you. So when we made that switch from, let's buy a small place for retirement, to, let's just sell everything and move. It still feels a little crazy, but it was, you know, it was, the reason it worked was that it was well founded in a thought process behind that, I guess, right?
In addition to you mentioned the welcome you got. Tell me about your initial impressions of the Oregon wine industry. What was it at the time you moved into it? What did you feel it was and could be, perhaps?
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously, it was. I mean, when we came, there was already a solidly established industry, right? Still young, but. You know, like for example, my first impression when I went to what used to be called the Oregon Days, the Oregon Wine Days, which was the Oregon Symposium, it was so small. You know, my first time that I attended, it was so small, and to see it now, it's dramatic. I mean, but I think that, I mean, there's many things that have evolved as well, right? So I think the quality of the wine is better than ever, and I think there's even more opportunity to continue pushing that. But I just think in many ways it was a bit rustic, you know? It was more rustic. Now there are more formal organizations. There's a level of professionalism maybe that is more interwoven across, which didn't exist before. You know, I remember our first AVA meetings as well. It was just very different. It was like a group of friends.
Right. Well, we all fit into Ken's office.
Yeah. Right? So it's just So, and I mean, obviously I think the path is still, you know, I mean, there's tremendous growth potential, which is a bit scary as well.
But you have to just, I mean, there's something you just have to embrace and understand and what have you. And as you say, that the rustic aspect of it when we first came here was very appealing, because it was all about a handful of people back then. I mean, it's 15 years ago, and the industry was already 20 years old.
I mean, they're all
right? So in terms of material size, but you're right. It's changed from something where there were several people like us who were sort of coming into the industry as a mom and pop style, sort of buy your own, establish your own place, and now it's much more business orientated in terms of the businesses that buy vineyards and establish wineries here. You have to come in, or the ones we see coming in certainly are coming in with a different business model. Let's put it that way. The other thing is, which I think has been really interesting, is how stylistically wine has evolved. Let's take this AVA as an example, right? We have, through the work of the AVA committee and people working on that, really better understood what works best for this AVA. And I think the range of styles that this AVA produced when we first came here, including us at the sort of more ephemeral, lighter, more elegant end of the spectrum when we first made some of our wines. And there were some other wines in our AVA producing much bigger, bolder wines. And people seem to have gravitated towards the center of the underlying strength we get from the fruit in this AVA is undeniable in terms of but there's also an understanding that we can produce wine that is still elegant and sophisticated and layered and interesting, and I think people have gravitated towards that center from both ends of the spectrum, being comparatively simplistic, but big and bold and in your face, more sort of Napa style. No disrespect, but and more sort of very sort of trying to emulate the sort of Burgundy style, and we've established an Oregon style, if you like. And I think that's been immense, and I think that's what's really helped establish this AVA and generally the Willamette Valley as being a distinct style of Oregon wine, which is people can recognize and appreciate.
So you have the passion, now you have the place. So tell me about the actual process. Tell me about getting grapes in the ground and making wine and starting the business.
So, well, very early on, like I mentioned before, we met Scott Scholl, and we started talking, and we knew that we were going to be planting, and so it was like, okay, so what would it look like for us to start making wine in 2008 or 2009 when our own fruit starts, producing viable grapes for wine? And he's like, well, why wait? It's like, I can help you get in touch with fruit sources. And the reality is, at that point in time, there was not enough Oregon wine. I mean, it's just like, it was so in demand. And we were like, oh, well, okay.
Yeah, we were like first.
And so, yeah.
Demand outweighs the supply. Prices are high.
So our first vintage was in 2005, and we weren't living here. So Scott was making our wine, and we would come every month and a half to taste, to work harvest with him, to start building the house. So we were here all the time, for a period of 2 years until we permanently came here. But yeah, so we started making wine with purchased grapes from this AVA and from the Chehalem Mountains AVA. And, but yeah, so we, like I said before, we received a lot of advice from different winemakers who, were veterans in the area. There was one who's like, you need to plant everything to Pommard clone, and then, but it's just like, people really, we got a lot of advice.
And people with a lot of experience. And of course, as with any set of advice, it all differs.
Yeah.
And so you have to realize very quickly that you have to make your own decisions, right?
But Kevin Chambers also, he came and walked the property with us. And it was really actually fun. Just about 2 months ago, he was here again, and he hadn't been here in all that time.
Oh, is that right?
But anyway, that's an aside. But yeah, so we ended up planting, the first portion of the vineyard was just a little bit over 4 acres, and we planted all Pinot Noir. So we strictly, even to this day, just have Pinot Noir planted. We planted Pommard and 667 and 777. And, our approach was really to surround ourselves by people who knew what they were doing, and that we would slowly learn, right? But I went to Chemeketa to study, the science of winemaking. I didn't do the full certification, but I took that, and then Guy took some online courses on viticulture. But very early on, also, we started working with Results Partners, and they've been a key partner, even to this day, because the cat is playing with the cables. Oh, yeah.
That's a new one.
So, and then in 2017, we added additional acreage. So we're at close to 6 acres. We planted some of the same clones, but then added 115. But we've debated a lot. When we first started, we thought we wanted to plant 25 acres of grapes.
Yeah, the business plans changed
that
a little
was,
bit.
it completely
Yeah.
changed.
It's been really interesting,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah. I mean, hence the size of the initial property was
Yes.
driven towards
Yeah.
larger volumes that we now anticipate making
Yeah.
in our lifetime.
Yeah, because originally we thought we'll build a big winery with a tasting room, but that is like so not what our vision is now, you know? I think, again, the wine industry has grown so much, and from the time that we started to now, it's more than doubled in terms of amount of wineries. And so it keeps pushing the envelope, I think, in terms of you need to excel and find what your niche is and what your offering is to the public, right? How can you differentiate yourself? And I think one of the key things for us has been, because originally we were making our wine down in Carleton, because that's where Raptor Ridge was, sharing a space with Carleton Cellars, right next to Ken Wright. And there was a tasting room there, and so on Saturdays we would take turns. We would have to go down there, and we had little kids, and we were tired, and because we both had corporate jobs, because I had gone back to work, and it's like, okay, this is not going to work for us. How can we make it work and still be fun, right? Because this is like our journey. And so we decided to just start doing tastings at home. And then a few years back, we just focused on, okay, we're just going to have an elevated experience in which we just offer private seated tastings, do comparative tastings in which we're offering 4 wines, current release with libraries, and that has really been sort of the sweet spot in terms of our current volume of production and how we can sell. And so the vision has evolved now to, we're not going to be producing 5,000 cases. Maybe we'll get to 1,000, 1,500, and we will always do just private, But, I think the experience is unique. You're coming into our home and you're experiencing, during the summer and fall, the vineyard from which we make the wine from. Because now, since 2010, all of the wines we produce just come from our vineyard. We moved 100% to estate. Yeah.
And it has to be. I mean, the ability to be to do your best has to be ingrained in what you enjoy doing, and that's the key. Is that as we've, I made the comment earlier about all the mistakes we've made and all the sort of the sort of trial and error version of learning. Really has come to, we've tried things and we haven't liked them. We've tried other things and we have liked them. And this is really, it's boiled down to doing this kind of go-to-market approach. Really just suits who we are, what our lifestyle is, what we can present. And it means that we can be confident in continually making the best wine we can possibly make. It gives us comfort that when we are presenting our wine and selling our wine, we don't have to, because we make a small amount of wine, we don't have to cut any corners. We can focus all the time we need to do on it. We can make every best effort to make the best possible wine, and that gives us an ability to be able to sell it with a true passion and a true belief that it's the best we can possibly do. And that suits us as people anyway, because it is a lifestyle choice by definition.
Yeah.
You have to go and you have to want to do this and have to enjoy doing it. Some people go like, how can you do this? How can you have 2 kids and, I still have a day job and we drive the kids all over the place at being teenagers, so it's like we're constant taxi drivers on top of everything else. Yes. And people are amazed that we do this, and it's why? It's because we really enjoy it. That has to be the case.
Yeah, well, it's interwoven in our daily life, right? It's like the business and our family life are so integrated. Yeah.
Tell me about, you mentioned kind of the wine style you had in mind, at least to start with. Tell me about winemaking philosophy. What do you want Atticus wines to, what do you want people to get out of Atticus wines?
So when we originally started, and when we first came, we actually really fell in love initially with the more elegant and ethereal style of Pinot Noir. And that's where philosophy-wise, stylistically, we wanted to go. Now we knew the AVA, this AVA, had a slightly different profile to that, more darker fruits, more tannin, but we never really were prepared, I think, for the kind of power that this vineyard produces, because this vineyard is just naturally really intense, concentrated flavors. Even like in the cooler vintages, it's no wimp. And so we had to evolve to fully embrace that, right? And so like the evolution was, okay, how can we make a wine that can balance that power from our vineyard but still be elegant, And I think there's been years that for us have been a challenge, and we've been learning, right? We've had hot years, we've had, the cooler years, and I think that I feel that, I know our vineyard more now and what the quality it is that it will produce. And things like when we first started, we were told, there's this like magic formula, 2 tons per acre, that's what you should be focusing on. Well, we learned that like there's no way that we can do this in this vineyard, right? And so again, by surrounding ourselves by people who really knew what they were doing, we've learned and we've made tweaks along the way.
Yeah, the RP has been a real, a source of knowledge, and
first,
Scott obviously as well. But
first Luc Pedotti and then Daniel Fay. We've been working with him now for a long time.
Yeah, the depth of experience these guys bring is and it goes back to that original point around how people are very willing to offer knowledge and experience in support of you, and it's not just the people we work with contractually. It's a bunch of other people who offer just solid advice, and it's always very helpful.
I think, you were asking a little bit about the philosophy, and I think one of the things that is really important is that we're very vintage driven. That's something that I've learned from Scott is, even though I may have my preferences, you really just want to let the vintage speak for itself. And so that's really important. One of the things that really appealed to me, I never thought that I was going to end up being the one, having a stronger hand in the winemaking. I always thought it was going to be Guy. But I was the one who became a harvest intern just to learn, and that's when I fell in love with it. And more than anything, what I fell in love with was the aromatics of Pinot Noir, like to me, like 95% of the wine is the aroma, the profile that it has on the nose. Like to me, that just, it wins me over. But Scott and Guy are very texture driven. And so that has been that's also super important when we're making our wines is coming up with that, and I think that's part of that balance that I'm talking to you about is having that power perhaps in the texture and in the mouthfeel, but still having the beautiful, aromatics. But it's been an evolution, right? As we've learned from our vineyard. Yeah.
No, it's a lot of fun when we can all sit down together. So it doesn't often happen with
when we do our blending exercises.
With Scott and with Shannon as well up there at Raptor Ridge. If all 4 of us sitting down, that's a rare occasion. But we do try and, as Ximena says, I don't have as much time on it. Ximena spends all her time on the wine side these days, and so is much more heavily involved in the whole winemaking process and all the decisions there. But when we do go up and sit down and taste through the barrels, that's just really interesting because you do see similarities of themes of stylistically, and we are we have some overlap, but we certainly have some different, views on, or not views, but sort of different aspects to what we like and how it works and where it works.
I always bring him the candidates for our blends, and he provides his opinion. Our daughter as well, she participated this year for the first time, which was awesome.
That's awesome.
So we all agreed on the one blend, but on the other one we weren't in agreement. But Guy's like, you're always going to do what you want to do anyway.
I was just going to ask. He offers his opinion, but do you listen to his opinion? So was there a moment along the way when you kind of felt like this was going to be a viable business, that this was something you could do could see yourself doing? Was there a moment when you thought, I'm a winemaker, or we're winemakers?
Always and never.
Yeah, I think so. Right.
I still feel as though we are infants in this game.
Yeah,
15
I
years
agree.
in, or 12 years in, whichever way you look at it. But because there's just so much to learn. You never have 100% knowledge, and I don't even feel I have 50% knowledge. It's just that there is so much to learn, and every vintage, as Ximena says, brings a different aspect to it, and every customer brings a different viewpoint and a different challenge, if you like. And the cat. Okay.
Oh, you
Very
have
friendly.
a visitor.
All good.
You okay?
All good.
But yeah, so in terms of I think you agree, right? We just have so much to learn that we feel we're very much at the beginning of the journey. But also you look back and go like, wow, we've learned so much at the same time, right? It's like, it's a bit like being parents. You've established some level of understanding, but boy, there's a whole part to learn because everything's going to change. The industry changes, the customers are changing, the climate's changing, the vines are getting older. We've got some new vines coming in. They're going to give us all new challenges all along the way. And, science is evolving. And so there's always, and that's half the fun of it, is that no two wines are the same, particularly Pinot, right? And even one bottle can vary between two glasses, right? Just because it has a little more air or a little more time or whatever. That's the joy of it, is that it's constantly evolving. You're never settled on 2 feet with being, I'm good here. And if you're thinking that, you're making a mistake, right? And that's, for me, that's the joy of it.
But in terms of, because you were saying, is this a viable business, right? And so, I think that's such a long road. And I think that, we're very happy where we are right now with our level of production. I think it's important for us to sort of keep it at this scale now that our kids are where they are, their age and all of their activities. And who knows, maybe when they're a little bit older, then we will take the next step and do something bigger. But like I said before, it's never going to be huge, right? So it's been very clear for us that we're never going to make, huge amounts of money from this. But it's sort of like our journey, and hopefully one of the children will be interested, or maybe both, in the future, and they can take it even further if they're interested, right? But it's a way of life, and I think that's really important for us. The cat is hilarious.
I have a cat sleeping on my lap as I'm doing this interview right now. Just for the record here, this is a first. Had animals. I think I've ever had one fall asleep on my lap. This is amazing.
She likes you.
Apparently, I'm in the right chair too. So tell us about the name and the label. You have the Atticus wines. You have the role of the owl. Tell me about how you went about choosing a name and a brand.
Yes. So very early on, Guy and I knew that the name of our vineyard, if we ever had a vineyard, would be called Atticus after Atticus Finch. And it was just, we were really in love with that character, what he stood for, and so that's what we wanted our vineyard to be called. And then early on,
it just struck us as being, as Ximena says, the character and everything he brings, right, stands for. Thank you. Is important, but also just the other things fell into place. Like it's a good, for us, we feel it's a good, strong, clear name. We didn't feel we wanted to do the family name for some reason. I'm not quite sure we didn't fit us per se, and it was just all those things are just, once you come across one of these names and you just go like, that works. And sometimes in a way it's like sort of choosing a child's name. You sort of go like, you do lots of things and you have lots of ideas, and then you go and one comes to mind, you go yep, and you both go yep, that's the one. And it was one of those moments, right? We just then that's and this was a long time before we ever moved here or decided to move to Oregon, actually.
Yeah, so like I said, it's very, very early on before we, but then we had partners before, and she is Greek, and so the owl is the symbol of the goddess Athena, who was the goddess of the area around Attica, which is the area which is now Athens, and and Athena is the goddess of war and wisdom, and so it sort of all came full circle from that perspective as well, right? There was meaning for them and meaning for us. Yeah.
So tell me about your 15 years or so into Oregon wine now. Tell me about, we talked a little bit earlier about how your kind of impressions had changed of the industry. Tell me a little bit more about what you think Oregon wine looks like right now, end of 2019, and maybe where you see it as you look a decade down the road.
Well, you're probably better placed because you're on various boards and committees.
Well, I think there seems to be, less smaller players, and there's, there's bigger operations coming in. Within our own AVA, that's very obvious. I think in general that just makes everyone up their game, and I think it's not just that, but then everything that comes with it, right? You have more restaurants, you have more hotels, you have more, there's this whole industry that continues to grow. I think from an industry perspective, it'll be really interesting to see how that growth can be sustained, because there are finite resources as well, not just the land, but water, is an important resource. I serve in the conservation district as well, and I know that is a big concern. Anything having to do with agriculture, right? But so I think that's climate, water. Those are all challenges that we're going to face as our industry continues to grow.
You're getting this on camera.
It's fantastic.
I'm
it's the first for us.
It's a bit of a distraction.
I'm a true professional here. I just roll with it.
I'm being distracted by it, I'm just...
It's all the catnip in my pockets.
So, it'll be really interesting. I think that it'll be bigger, and we're going to have more wineries, and it's inevitable, right? And I think we're going to have more tourists as well, because that's what we want. We want people to come to be able to experience the beauty of the area as well as the beautiful wines. But it's going to come with many challenges as well. It's the land, our resources like water, but also the need for keeping this bucolic, agricultural landscape. That is one of the main draws. And I don't think we can take that for granted. And that's why I started getting involved with the conservation district, because I think it's really important for us to protect that. So, I think we're going to have to balance the growth of the industry with those needs.
It is a tough balance, because you have the joy that people have coming here is because it's such a beautiful countryside area, and it's you meet when you visit wineries, I mean, less so than you did 15 years ago, but you would meet, virtually every time you'd meet owners or people involved with the business and what have you, winemakers and directly pouring their wine all the time. And now that's evolving to be more tasting room based experiences and what have you, and that's just the evolution of a wine area, I think. And you look at places like Napa, Sonoma, and so on, and that's to extend our future. You have to imagine that's going to be the case, just because that's where the money from the bigger businesses is going to drive it. We will continue, as Ximena says, to do the mom and pop show, if you like, of having our face and our presence being a very key part of the experience here, and having this site and the wine from this site as being part of that experience. And I think a few other wineries and colleagues in this area have the same philosophy, and so I think there'll be a mix going forward. There'll be the bigger businesses with the beautiful tasting rooms and the great wines and what have you, evolve in that style, and I hope there'll be a balance as well, because that's I think what will make it work. Because if you're a visitor, you can if you're visiting 2 or 3 wineries in a day, you can do
a combination,
a couple of one and one of the other kind of thing, and see a bit of the variability. And this is, for me, it's what's interesting about this area, is that you have anything from a few hundred cases to tens of thousands of cases of production, we all work together to make the AVA and the valley a better place in the right way that we're talking about here. But it's going to be tough. Resources run through, right? And different people have different opinions at different times, so we have to work together to make it work.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that I would say, right, that I would hope, and I feel that it's still there. I think, obviously, there's a lot more competition today, but I think it still is a friendly competition. I think that we are all still, I mean, we have colleagues in this industry that are great friends, and there are competitors, but at the same time, I think that we can all work together to keep advancing.
Right. Yeah, the general philosophy is that Oregon wine is such a small percentage of just the American wine market, let alone the international wine market, that whatever we can do to make our wines better known, have better customer appreciation, helps everyone at the end of the day. And so, that has always been the philosophy of the leaders of our AVA and of that particular group, and that's something we've embraced and look to help with as well. But it's pretty unique when you come in and you see people who are well established, like the leaders of our AVA here, who offer their time and efforts and investment back into the AVA for limited direct return. It really is, most of that effort benefits small people like us, right? And we're just really indebted to that kind of thing. It's been amazing.
Well, I want to go back to something you mentioned when you talked about kind of working around your ridge and catching the kind of winemaking bug. Tell me about what it was about the act of winemaking that caught you, and maybe something that about winemaking that surprised you that you weren't prepared for.
If I say it, then you have to edit it out. No, I think one of the things that really just captivated me, because you're tired, but it's sort of like doing punch downs was one of my favorite things, and it was just because of the evolution of the aromatics and then tasting, it just that sort of like learning of how the grapes transform into the wine. It was just fascinating. But there were just little things, like doing punch downs at first vintage is really like one of the things that in a way sealed my fate, just because I was so in love with the perfume of these wines. But then the other thing was, once we had pressed the wines, we were getting ready to barrel, it was that intoxicating experience of barreling down, the fresh wine, the baby wine into the new barrels that had just been steamed. So you have that beautiful aroma of the oak married with the wine that is just coming in. Oh my gosh, that's just like one of my favorite things. Yeah. So and that So those.
It was all over at that point.
It just it's just really, I think. Yeah,
and, you know, it's interesting that we because I had more experience, some more relationships with the wine parts of the world when we first came here, and it was originally, you know, the vineyard thing was originally my dream. There was a natural thought that I'd get more involved to start with, but actually thinking about it, it makes more sense that Ximena ended up doing it. I mean, it happened just more by happenstance than direction, but you know, Ximena's abilities really match the winemaking needs in terms of, you know, there's Ximena has, her memory is remarkable, but she has, you know, a good understanding of how things work together from a chemistry perspective, in terms of whether it's making food or making wine. Those things have similarities and just the thought process of how everything evolves through that process. But so memory and an understanding of the science, an understanding of how things meld together as an artist. Those three aspects are a strength that she has. Which, you know,
he makes it sound like I really understand the science.
It's true. You do, because you do. You look at the science,
to this
and
day,
it helps you make decisions, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that
with a lot of help, but no, it's.
So that, you know, it makes a lot of sense that she's evolved in that position, and that's why, you know, with the help of the likes of Scotland, Sharon, and people at Raptor Ridge, the wine ends up being pretty damn good. You know, so
yeah, but like. I just think it's a continual learning experience, really, And so I think every year, you know, the first vintage, the first year that we had harvest here, my mother was here. And I remember I was so nervous, the anticipation, picking at the right time, you know? And she was like, you need to calm down. Like, I felt like I was having another baby. That was my mom telling me. But every year I have that same sort of like anticipation, you know? It's just like so exciting that we're gonna be picking our grapes. And it's just, so.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. So you talked a little bit earlier about sort of potential future thoughts for the two of you and for Atticus. Tell me what you kind of hope Atticus Wines looks like 10 years down the road. Where do you hope to be?
Well, perhaps at that time we will already maybe be at the 1,000 case target, right? I think our view would be to, you know, build a barn, you know, / potentially a winery, you know, where we would move our production. But I think that, you know, it would be very similar. Maybe we will plant another couple of acres on the north side. We've talked about doing that, sort of hedge our bets with the climate, and maybe have, you know, a different palate to add to our wines, right? Because we believe that the north-facing vines would produce slightly different, you know, profile. But you would still get that very much family experience and, you know, very personal touch. Because even if we do build the kind of barn that I have in my head, to be able to, you know, have more space for our wine club, which has kept growing, we would still do private seated tastings, you know? So not a lot would change. It's just we want to find a way to scale what we do, but still with that very personal touch. Well, I mean...
Yes, and the 10-year horizon is a constantly shifting one. So if you ask 5 years, it wouldn't give me the same answer. It's like, oh, I'll be retired by then from my job. I'll be helping out, all that sort of stuff. And everything moves with the time.
Yeah, but I think in 10 years' time he'll be up and down the rows with his tractor.
Yeah, that's always the
Yeah.
plan. Yes, the tractor and me. That's the
Yeah,
tractor vision.
The tractor vision.
The tractor vision.
I love it.
Which has been, that's been 5 or 10 years away for the last 15 years.
That tractor vision is very prevalent in the industry. There's a lot of people with that vision.
But the reality is that the pragmatism has come into play, and I understand that Daniel's team is way better with a tractor than I'll ever be, and so I'm not sure that taking that path would necessarily be a viable one on that basis. So I probably have better things I can do with my time. But there's 50 acres to manage here, and there's always things I can be doing around here. And if we do have some other building to, as a tasting room or something, then there's work to do there. And that's what I really enjoy doing customer-facing stuff as well, in terms of helping out here in terms of tastings here, or when we do the AVA tastings up at the various different places we do them these days. That's a lot of fun. So people who haven't tasted our wine before,
The ladies like his accent.
well,
Not only the ladies, but just in general.
But no, I think that's always a lot of fun. When I say, "Hey, have you tried our wine before?" and they go, "No," I go, "I feel great. Here's someone who doesn't know our wine. I can introduce them to the story and us and our wine, and that's great. That's a lot of fun as well." So, and speaking of small, those AVA tastings are now big events, right? But the first one of those was up at Anime 9 years ago. I don't know how many it was, but
up
they were
in their tasting room, and maybe there were like 10, 12 wineries.
Yeah, that was it. I remember Jay Mack was there, and a couple of others, Ashley Campion, I can't remember who she was pouring for, but there were a few of us there, and maybe 50 people came through the door. It wasn't a lot of people, and it was like 2 or 3 hours, and there was just a table each, like a dozen tables. That was it, and then we sat outside and had a beer afterwards and went home. That was it. It was, and things have evolved.
Things have changed.
But you have to do those first ones before they can become what they are today. So and that's it's the same in everything. You need to start and try it out and build and build and build, and that's what we've seen from this AVA. So it'll be it's evolved in the right kind of directions and to do great things, and we'll see how it goes from here.
Yeah, but within the 10 years also, I think we have talked about having more of a plan for the whole property and doing other things.
Yeah.
We have a small woodland here that we want to ensure that is sustainable, and that, so...
Woodland's a nice way of saying overgrown Christmas tree farm.
Yes. Well, there's a few oaks in there as well.
True.
And so we want to... we need to put a program in place so that we can manage that.
Yeah.
We want to have some animals as well.
And more oaks generally.
Yeah, we want to plant more oaks, bring some of those native, Oregon oaks. Our neighbors, so they bring longhorns, every spring. They've just brought them again. So we would love potentially to have some longhorns as well, and just
Well, I was advised we needed Highland cattle. Actually.
Yeah, I prefer the
cows or
longhorns.
something.
Yes, yes. So there are different things that we want to do holistically. And always just looking at what can we do to our property, not just the vineyard, to just make it even better for the future, So I'm excited about that as well.
And that's the kind of time frame that we'll find out whether our kids are vaguely interested or not as well. So that'll be at that point where if we see interest or not, we'll obviously be kind of binary on what we do going
What
forward
next
from there.
steps.
So we'll see.
So, last question I have for you. This is the most important one of all. What's the key to a successful marriage in the Oregon wine industry? How does this work?
How does this work? Well, I think, from my perspective, and I don't know if it's maybe because I am Latin, but I am more temperamental and more emotional about things. And so, like this journey has been more of a roller coaster for me. And many times when our kids were small and I was still working in the corporate world, there were times in which like there was, I felt very overwhelmed. And I was like, oh my gosh, what did we get into? Even though I love what we're doing, like how can I possibly do this? And Guy has always been the anchor, I really feel that. And so all my worries, he was often the one who would be able to appease them. So in many ways, he brought a lot more, I guess, stability, to that. But yeah, I mean, I can't lie. It's been like sometimes, there's been interesting situations.
I mean, this week's been tough, right?
Yeah.
I mean, some weeks are tough, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's true. We are each other's rock from that perspective because we have different strengths and weaknesses, and we're aware of those. And when one of us is struggling, the other one can normally step up and be good because that's where they're strong in. So that's kind of helpful because we are pretty different, in terms of being British and French and some of those traits, and Ximena being Latin and having some of those traits, I'd say. And there's positives and negatives about both of those, and that kind of balances out. So, but I think the real truth for us goes back to that fact about we feel as though we're in the right place for us, for our lives, and so whatever else is going on, whatever else is, whatever difficulties or issues we're working through, we feel the underlying decisions we've made to be here doing what we do, and the big decisions about how, what we're trying to achieve for us, for our kids, for the land, are the right ones. And so whatever the day-to-day stuff is that's in the way, that's problematic or, time consuming or frustrating, whatever it is, are underlying decisions we're comfortable with. And we talk a lot about those big decisions, and we're aligned on those. So that's the important thing.
And even though we may not officially, review and change our business plan every year, we do talk about it. Well, we do.
Yeah, when was the last time?
Well, I walked you through it the other day.
Business plan like I do at work.
It's more informal, but I think it's key.
Granite.
But little things, like I talked to you about, like when we were managing, time in a tasting room down in Carleton, that was super stressful. It was stressful in our relationship, it was stressful in the family, and it wasn't working, and so it's like, okay, we need to do things differently. We always said we were going to have fun doing this, and so I think communication is key.
That's the bottom line, is that you're right. It's like we talked before about doing the best we possibly can. That's something we both need to do in everything we do, right? Not cutting corners. So having that concept when we're making the wine is only possible within the parameters of that smaller business that we talked about, and then doing, cutting off the stuff that we don't enjoy. Right.
I mean, that was,
making it about, like last weekend we had a tasting here, and it's a lot of fun. I know it's like, it's got to get the house prepared, get it all sorted out because it's our home, and we've got to get it clean and ready and get all the glasses out, and that's like preparation, and you might be happy doing something else, but as people arrive, it's pretty cool. Some really interesting conversations, new people. Along with some older, or some people who've been here before and so on. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I think we've learned through time, and it's not just through the time being in the business, but it's just, as you get older, you understand what your limits are, where you're good at, where you want to spend your time. And so I think that's really important, is trying to be honest to yourself,
And we haven't succeeded yet. That's the other thing. In the same way that you're asking us about, winemaking, we're this far in the journey, and we have the rest of it to go. So we have, we're not successful until one of us pops our clogs and we're done. But
Well,
we have to.
You could call it differently, right? It's like there's many successes along the way.
No, I hear you. What I'm
right?
saying is like, you success so far, but then I don't think you're successful until you've done a whole
Yeah.
lifetime.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an ongoing thing. Yes.
Very clear watching you interact how it works too. So I get it. I get it. I think everyone watching this will
Yes,
get it. So that's all the questions that I have for you. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have asked? Anything we didn't cover that we should have covered? Anything else you'd like to say here?
I don't have anything else to add. It's been a fun journey, and it continues to be. Yeah.
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 Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you both so much. We really appreciate your time today, your stories, and we'll go ahead and let you off the hook here.